Chapter 83. High Chief Ulermak. Adventurer level, NA. Orc, Kirkinian. "Fuck you with a pike, orc!" King Lofen spit. He then crumpled the document he had just read, or likely pretended to read, and threw it at my feet. Even if he didn't know how to read, the contents of the document were obvious. A call for a complete and unconditional surrender and the abdication of his throne. He stood defiantly before me, chains clinking on occasion. His own soldiers were the ones who put him in those chains, but you won't find me complaining about it. I stared at him from his own throne with a smug expression on my face. "Only if you cuddle me after, drow," I said with a sneer, then allowed a serious expression to return to my face. "Allow me to recapitulate your situation. Your armies have disbanded and returned to their duties as farmers and guards. Every single one of your cities and villages have opted to bend the knee to the unified chiefdoms, and your nobility is begging to be spared any punitive action. Some have even abdicated their titles to me, to grant to whomever I see fit. It is not an exaggeration when I say that everyone in these lands recognize me as their new ruler, with the exception of you. And I never fucking will, you piece of— Whether or not you do is vastly irrelevant," I interrupted with a growl. "Nobody gives a fuck what you think anymore. You promoted a vampire to be your master gener— I was deceived!" Lofen shouted. "You dare to stand there and judge me as if you've never been tricked, like anyone here has never fallen for a lie?" The Drow King gesticulated at the gathered nobles, causing his chains to rattle. Some of them flinched, but most continued to stare at their former king with an ice-cold expression. A select few were expressing open hatred and derision. Lofen had not been a kind king, and while a lot of his cruelty had been forced on the peasantry, not even those with power had been safe from his tyranny. I'm certain most of them were actively asking the higher ones to stop him from formally surrendering. Hells, if it weren't for the drow fearing my soldiers, there'd likely be a mob outside crying for Lofen's blood. Yeah, I made a vampire the commander of my armies. But he was a drow, and drow can't be vampires. How in all the hells was I supposed to know the bastards had figured out a way? He demanded. We executed his family and servants, then destroyed his holdings. If he's still alive, he has nothing left. So what more could you— I want justice! My shout reverberated through the throne room. Year after year after year after year, you send your damned soldiers to invade my lands. People die, but such is politics. Trying to conquer a neighbor you ignorantly believe is weaker than you is normal, understandable even. But your pet vampire crossed the line, Lofen. People didn't just die. They were turned into monstrosities. A murmur of agreement came from my own great chiefs, who were standing with the drow nobility to watch the spectacle. Lofen turned up his nose and sucked his teeth, causing an anger to rise within me. I gripped the arm of his throne in an attempt to control myself. "I fail to see how that's my fault," Lofen said. Are you blind then? It is your fault because you are the king," I shouted again, rising from his throne. "Your actions and decisions led to this tragedy. If anyone else were king, if the stain of your lineage didn't exist upon this land, this never would have happened. That is why you're to blame." Lofen glared at me in silence, finally at a loss for words. I matched his glare, barely able to contain my fury at his infantile behavior. Ashamed as I am to admit it, part of me was hoping he would continue to refuse to surrender. "Draft another copy," I said to the scribe, then turned to Blagroth. "If he doesn't surrender by dusk, he is to be kept within his own dungeons and executed at dawn, after a pauper's meal. I will grant no additional quarter." "Yes, High Chief," Blagroth said. "You won't get away with this, Ulermak," Lofen growled. "There's nothing to get away with, you inbred fool," I replied as I sat once again. "Kings that refuse to gracefully surrender must be put to death for a war to end. If you had even a trace of actual royalty within you, you would know that the terms are perfectly reasonable for your crimes. Not just the crimes against my people, but those against your own as well. You won't squirm your way out of this, Lofen. You'll take accountability and renounce your crown, or you will die a criminal's death. There's nothing further to discuss. Take him back to his quarters." Lofen opened his vile mouth to shout insults or curses at me, but the guards used the opportunity to shove a muzzle rope between his teeth. His shouts became mumbles, and his chains clinked as they escorted him from the throne room, Blagroth trailing close behind. "I hope he stays stubborn," Great Chief Olmag said. A murmur of agreement spread through the gathered nobles and chiefs, but I held up my hand and shook my head. Though a part of me agrees, as leaders we need to take the stance that it isn't right to wish death upon another, I said. Well, yeah, I know that, Olmag said, shuffling his feet. I believe you, but I doubt that everyone here is aware of our morality and what is expected of them moving forward. My eyes traveled over the drow nobles. Most of them shrank under my gaze and only a few met my eyes. Those few showed no signs of hostility or resentment. Some looked grateful even. With a small sigh, I stood from Lofin's throne and cleared my throat to give a speech. Hear this, I said loudly. Regardless of how tomorrow goes, Lofin's reign will end. As some of you know, Bolasir has released their claims, so these lands will be split amongst the unified chiefdoms and the Empire of Kalkuti. I cannot and will not speak for foreign rulers, but those of you whose lands will fall under my responsibility will be allowed to keep your positions so long as you swear fealty. This will be a time of transition, though, and with transition comes tribulations. Your titles will change. Instead of dukes, we have great chiefs. Instead of counts, barons, and the like, we have chiefs. Your responsibilities will remain largely the same, but the methods that you employ to carry out those responsibilities will change. The next few years will be turbulent as you learn to do things our way, but you will be expected to lead your people with honor, competence, and dignity regardless. Any who doubt their capabilities and wish to renounce their titles are welcome to do so at any point. More murmuring came from the crowd of nobles, but no one stepped forward to abdicate. Satisfied, I took my seat once again and gestured a dismissal. The drow nobles bowed low, but the great chiefs simply gave a respectful nod. I had to try not to laugh at the contrast as they began to leave the throne room. Hi, Chief. Lion's voice suddenly appeared in my ear. You really shouldn't sneak up me, Lion, I said, suppressing a start. It is difficult to refrain from reacting with violence, especially after a series of battles. Forgive me, sir, she replied with a surprisingly serious tone. A representative from the deep wild forest is here to speak with you. The disappearance of Lion's typically playful attitude made sense. Many consider the fair folk to be peaceful, strange, and limited to their homes deep within the forests. Those that are less ignorant know all too well how cataclysmic an angry wilder can be. I can see them, I nodded gravely. The various agreements that we have with the deep wild forest includes a defensive pact. However, the messenger that had informed me of the vampiric offensive against the deep wild had told me that they do not require my aid. My brow furrowed as I worried about whether this may have changed. No, you can't, I'm invisible, a voice said from in front of me. My guards, ignorant of what Lion had told me, immediately drew their weapons and began looking around wildly for the owner of the voice. I held up a hand to calm them. They hesitated, unsure of how to behave. Stand down, I commanded. The guards immediately snapped out of their confusion and returned to their rest positions. Ah, I didn't mean to scare them, the voice said as a mote of light began to appear. Just thought it would be funny if you happened to say that and I happened to be invisible. Very amusing, I said with a tight-lipped smile. Welcome, Tix. How do you fare? My well-being is irrelevant, but you have my thanks for asking. The mote of light grew brighter until it formed the shape of a small, elf-like person. Then it dimmed slightly, and the high fairy became fully visible. Its golden wings glimmered in the light, and its matching hair somehow remained stationary despite the fluttering of its wings. Disturbingly green eyes met my own, and its angular features grew concerned. I'll need them back before I go, though, Tix said. What? Your thanks? I asked. Yes. Oh, you can have them. What? You can't just... The high fairy sighed and placed its hands upon its hips. That's not how it works, Ulurmak. I have to do something that you would thank me for to get them back. Wouldn't that make me give you my thanks, though? Yes. But right now, my thanks are your thanks. So when you give me your thanks, you're really just giving me my thanks back. I feel like it's not that hard to understand. I see. So what brings you here? I asked, hoping for good news. Oh, right. I am to inform you that the threat to the deep wild forest has ended. The vampires have moved on and are currently traveling toward the unified chiefdoms. How large is their army? I asked, alarm seeping into my voice. 12,253. Damn. That's far too many for village defense forces to handle. We might lose a few of them before we can respond. They're moving southwest from the deep wild forest, right? Tix pointed up, right down, then left. Yes. Okay, I said, then turned to one of my guards. Malakturn, did you hear all of this? Yes, sir, he replied. Good. Find Blagroth and tell him what you've heard here. Then tell him I said to send the mounted mages. Great Chief Gruns should be right behind the mages, understood? Yes, sir. Go. The guard took off at a run, quickly leaving the throne room to fulfill my command. The mages should be able to do some damage, but they wouldn't be able to rout the bloodsuckers by themselves. Gruns's forces won't be able to do it on their own either, but the lands of Mygrath foster strong orcs. They should be able to hold off the vampires long enough for us to reinforce them. I can make no promises, but we might be able to help, Tix said. How? I asked. Well, if you ask me for help, I have to tell the kings that you asked, and they will have to help. That's the agreement, right? I was under the impression that most of your forces were tied to the forest. Well, yeah, but that's just most. We probably won't be able to get rid of all the vampires, but we can provide at least a little bit of defense while you maneuver your forces. Probably. Not to speak out of turn, but why don't you just do that? Why make us ask? Lion asked with a cautious tone. Huh? Tix asked, tilting its head. The agreement. Our agreement with the Wilder of the Deep Wild Forest specifies that help must be requested before it can be rendered, I explained, saving the High Fairy. By their own laws, entering our territory without our explicit permission is equivalent to an invasion. They would expect reprisal. The same is true when the roles are reversed. Oh, Lion said. The ages-old agreement between the orcs and the Wilder has been revisited many times by both sides. The Defensive Pact edition was created by my grandfather, who negotiated with Mummeldobran for 22 consecutive hours to bring it about. The king of HFY had met its match with the stubborn old bastard, and the two became friends of a sort for the rest of my grandfather's life. The Defense Pact has since become a symbol of the friendship between the Wilder of the Deep Wild Forest and the people of the unified chiefdoms. It's never been invoked before, though. I've memorized the entirety of the text, as any high chief should, but I felt a certain amount of trepidation at the thought of invoking it. 3 reasons plagued my mind. First, the Wilder had not invoked the pact when they were being attacked. If we invoke it, they could see that as a sign of incompetence or weakness. No one wants a weak or dumb ally, and their trade is good for our economy. Second, even if I understand the text of the pact perfectly as written, there is room left for interpretation. If our interpretations of the Defensive Pact are different, which is entirely possible between our two peoples, it could lead to disaster. In the best-case scenario, we're able to come to an agreement on the various stipulations within the pact. In the worst-case scenario, the consequences would be dire. Third, the pact calls for a reward given to the side that provides assistance. The reward must be agreed upon beforehand, but if they ask for something we cannot give and refuse to compromise, it will breed resentment between our people. If I had to guess, I'd say that this was likely why Mummeldobran didn't invoke the pact. 3 damned good reasons to say no to invoking the pact. Unfortunately, the reason to say yes was much heftier. It could save the lives of those under my protection. Even if I have to fight tooth and claw or negotiate for days on end, I have a duty to my people to keep them safe. Okay, Tix. I wish to invoke the Defensive Pact, I said solemnly. Please ask Mummeldobran what reward it would seek for its aid in protecting my people. Oh, you two are going to have me running back and forth all day, aren't you? Tix laughed, trying to lighten the mood. Ah, yes, the life of a messenger is a rough one sometimes, Lion added with a chuckle. Messenger? Small orc, I'm not a messenger. I'm a high fairy. But you deliver messages all the time. Well, yes, but no, I'm not. Tix trailed off, thinking deeply for a moment. Oh, the stone-birthed bastards. When did the fuckers trick me into becoming a messenger? We all stared at the fuming high fairy for a moment, wondering if it was serious or playing a prank. Well, the first time I saw you deliver a message was when I was a child, I said. And are you not the one who invited my grandfather to negotiate with Mummeldobran? So the whole time, then? Tix asked with a deep frown. This whole time I've been a messenger? I guess so. I don't want to be a messenger. I'm important, damn it. Messengers are important, Tix. Oh, you know damn well what I mean, Ulermak. Important like one of your chiefs, not important like a shit shoveler. Well, if it helps, I've always considered you to be more of a diplomat than a messenger. Gruz, one of my guards, added. Diplomats deliver messages all the time, but they're very important representatives of their nations. The High Fairy turned to look at Gruz as if the burly orc had just saved its life with an unbelievably heroic act. A diplomat, you say? Actually, Gruz is right, I interjected. Your role is closer to that of a diplomat than a messenger. Lion even introduced you as a representative of the deep wild forest, remember? Tix crossed its arms and nodded slowly, then smiled smugly. It opened its mouth to speak but suddenly froze. The High Fairy's eyes rolled to face the back of its head, and a slight shudder passed through its body. Lion gasped, but I held up a hand to soothe her, having seen this happen before. Tix recovered from this state quickly and looked at me with a bashful expression. What did Mumoldobran say? I asked. Well, it wasn't just Mumoldobran, Tix replied, playing with its hands. But yeah, the King of High Fae wants to bring Nick, Nash, and Yulk Alta to you as commanded by the Higher Ones. The Higher Ones? Lion asked. What? That's fine, I said, interrupting the scout. Though I doubt my consent is a matter of importance. What else is there? The vampires have disappeared. The King of the Bone Fairies, Hull, was watching them from a safe distance, and reports that they have simply vanished. What? I asked. They're gone? Yes. So does that mean my people are safe? I guess so. Tix shrugged. I feel that vampires disappearing is pretty concerning, though. Could they have turned invisible like you did? No, such tricks wouldn't work on normal wilder, let alone a king. If Hull says they're gone, they're gone. But how? I don't know, but we'll do what we can to find out, Tix said with an uncharacteristically serious tone. No promises, of course. Before I could say anything else, a vortex of inexplicable energies appeared behind Tix. My guards were quick to come to arms, but once again I waved them off. Portals to the Fair Realm were not unknown to me either. Oh, they're here already, Tix said happily. The vortex vanished, and in its place stood 4 people who were holding hands. It took but a moment before I recognized Nick, Nash, and Yulk. The 4th being, likely an archfey, was unknown to me. It released Nash's hand and stepped back. This is where we part ways, it said. May fortune find you. You too, Algebron, Yulk said with a nod. Wait for me, Tix said, then turned to me. Well, time for me to go. Be well, Tix, I said with a smile. The High Fairy and I locked eyes awkwardly for a few moments. Oh shit, right, I said, remembering the beginning of our conversation. You have my thanks for keeping me apprised of current events. You're welcome. Tix fluttered over to Algebron and sat on its shoulder. Another vortex formed around the pair of Wilder, then disappeared with a pop. The 3 Alta boys looked around for a moment, then bowed to me one by one. Welcome to the Night Kingdom, brothers of the Alta clan, I said with a grin at their surprise. Thank you, High Chief, Yulk replied. Congratulations on your victory. And thank you, my grin widened. So, what have you been up to? Chapter 84. Yulk Alta. Adventurer Level 7. Orc, Nuleven. I see, High Chief Ulermak said as we finished our tale. The High Chief had listened attentively as we explained what had occurred since we left for the Empire of Kalkuti. He carefully managed his expressions, only showing concern when we explained the encounter with the Master Vampire. The concern dissipated once we revealed its fate, though. The last we heard about the vampire army, they were retreating, I explained. Yes, straight into the unified chiefdoms, as it turns out, Ulermak said. The 3 of us looked at each other, then back to the High Chief with expressions of shock and concern. His deep chuckle only intensified our expressions. It's no longer a problem, apparently. They've disappeared. Disappeared? I asked. Yes. Into thin air. We don't know where they've gone, but I'll take all the time to bolster our defenses I can get. I nodded my agreement with this sentiment, and Nick looked around the throne room. So is this the capital of the Night Kingdom? He asked. Yes. After you left, the armies of Bolasir and Kalkuti joined us for a nice little invasion. The Night Kingdom is no more, and King Lofin's fate will be decided tomorrow morning. Wow, that was fast. Well, nobody has ever accused Lofin's military of being competent. Plus, we were quite motivated, Ulermak growled. The horrors wrought upon Blurpus will take generations to forget. The throne room fell into silence for a few moments. Then, Ulermak regained his composure and leaned back in what used to be Lofin's throne. So, what's next for you 3? We plan to return home for now, I explained. I doubt we can do much to prepare for our meeting with the Summer Court, but we'll try to get some rest and recovery in. We'll definitely take on some quests, Nash added. A weapon at rest too long is inviting rust. The grand return of the glorious adventurers, Ulurmak laughed. I do hope you'll get a feast. However, there is a matter that I wanted to discuss with you, Yolk Alta. Oh? I asked. Yes. I plan to open a school of sorts, dedicated to the study of magic. I would like you to assist me in this endeavor. I stared at Ulurmak, frozen in shock. My mouth didn't know whether to drop my jaw or to drool. School? Of magic? Yes. I have heard of such facilities to the south and across the world, but we have no such facility. As such, prospective mages must either travel to these locations or find an apprenticeship to learn more about the art. Those that travel seldom return, as the length of time one spends learning magic frequently leads to setting down roots. Apprentices usually stay, but they're limited to the knowledge that their masters have. By building an academy within our borders, both of these issues are easily resolved. I see. I slowly nodded, allowing this revelation to sink in. And how may this humble mage assist such a grand plan? By teaching, of course, and helping us find other teachers. Teaching? I'm afraid I'm not qualified, I protested. I pulled your guild card. You know more spells than most, which implies that you are very familiar with the concept of magic on at least a basic level. I would even call it foundational knowledge, which is why I believe you would make a great general education specialist. Your specific role would be Professor of Magical Theory and Practice. How's the pay? Nash asked with a laugh. Professors will get an initial salary of 25 copper per day, which will be increased based on performance. There's also the chance to learn from other professors. Now it was Nash's turn to look shocked. My brother quickly turned to me, grabbing my shoulder. You have to take this job, Yulk, he said. 25 copper per day with free room and board at the Marfix Inn would set you up for life. Yes, I suppose it would, I nodded. I had frequently dreamed of an opportunity such as this, of course, but that had been idle fantasy. Now the opportunity had practically broken down my metaphorical door, and I found myself conflicted. Nash was correct in that I would be set for life with a position such as this, but how often would I be able to travel and see the world? When would I next see my brothers and mother? If I made this commitment, would I even be able to still help Nick get home? And what of the court? Will he be able to travel with us next summer? Nick conveniently asked. I don't see why not, Ulurmak shrugged. Yulk won't be our only professor of theory and practice. We'll figure out a time-off system that ensure the students' needs are met, while allowing the professors to take time away to further their skills or take care of other business. Oh, awesome, Nick smiled. And, can I study at this academy? Nash's eyebrows shot up, and he looked at Nick as if the human had suddenly morphed into an arch-fae. What? He asked. You're not going to train with me? Well, it's like you said, I've just about hit the limits of the training we can do together, Nick explained rapidly. I figure that until we can find an expert to further my swordsmanship, I can hone my magic. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable, I guess. Nash crossed his arms. The hells am I supposed to do, though? You can stay with Mom while we're at the academy, I interjected. Take some jobs, hone your talents, get to adventurer level 10. Nash's head whipped in my direction, and his face turned a slightly darker shade of green. I met his angry glare with a sly grin. Nick and Ulurmak looked confused at Nash's reaction. Or I could just hang out in Kirkana and make sure you two don't have too much fun, Nash growled. You can take your time to decide, Ulurmak said. It will be a while before we have even the most basic of facilities ready. Before I let you go, though, the door to the throne room burst open and 2 large orcs angrily marched in. It took them a moment to see us because of their bickering. Oh, sorry, High Chief, we can come back later, the elder orc said. Having a meeting? The younger one asked. Wait, are those the Alta boys? I'll be damned! It was then that I recognized Great Chief Olmag. We had last seen each other at my father's funeral. We were quite young, and he was very kind, though a bit crass. It was rather surprising that he recognized us. And who's this with you by the soiled loincloths of my army? What the hells is that thing? I'm a human, Nick replied. My name's Nick. Uh-huh. Oh, right, yeah. The thing that was found in the dungeon. Olmag nodded and walked over to Nick. Pleasure to meet you, Nick. I'm Great Chief Olmag, slayer of blah blah blah. How are you doing? Olmag grabbed Nick's forearm and gave it a stiff shake. Nick, for his part, returned the greeting without being lifted off the ground. I'm well, and you? He asked. I'd like to know as well, Ulurmak said angrily. I assume there's a reason behind this interruption. Yes, High Chief. Tormund lowered his head apologetically. There is a disagreement regarding a certain stretch of land. The, noble that ruled over the territory directly to the north of Blurpus has decided to step down, and I would like to lay claim to that land. And? Argue it out. We have, but we reached a stalemate. The other great chiefs, Drow included, don't believe that the territory of Blurpus should grow when no one else's is. I argue that we were greatly impacted by the invasion, and our heroic acts against the vampire-led Drow army is the entire reason for this invasion. As such, we deserve the land, either as a reward or as compensation. And what are you here for, Olmag? You think I'm going to take that old windbag at his word? Olmag asked with a laugh. I came with to verify that he speaks the truth, both to you and to the other great chiefs. If he lied about my words, I would find out and force Blurpus to find another great chief. Yeah, but what if he never came to you in the first place? Then he wouldn't be lying about what you said, just putting words in your mouth, which is a lot less illegal. Fine, Ullrmak sighed. Tormund, you claim Blurpus was impacted? Elaborate, please. We lost an entire village, Tormund said with an offended tone. Oh? I was told it was an unregistered village. Were they paying taxes? Well, no, but nothing. Blurpus has not lost taxable revenue as a result of either of the invasions. In addition, with the threat of the Night Kingdom neutralized, new villages can be built closer to your border. If anything, our conquest of the Night Kingdom has already benefited you. And what of the lives of our soldiers? Everyone lost soldiers, Ullrmak's eyes narrowed. Even the Drow lost soldiers. No. The fair thing is to have the lands without chiefs hold an election and choose one. Wait, really? Olmag asked. Yes, really. Both Drow and Orc are going to be living shoulder to shoulder on a large scale for the first time in centuries. As such, we're about to enter a time of turbulence. Lofin was a fool and a tyrant, but he was still a Drow, and for some of our new subjects that is a far sight better than being ruled by Orcs. We need to be as fair as possible during this transition, or we will be lending credence to those with negative opinions of us. Well, you can't blame me for trying, Tormund said with a grin. All right, Olmag, let's let the others know what the High Chief has decided. Damn, maybe we should have just let you take it, Olmag said as the pair began to leave. Then Ullrmak wouldn't have spoiled things with his fairness speech. The great chiefs left the throne room, and the doors closed behind them with a loud thud. Nash, Nick, and I turned back to the High Chief. Well, I'm sure that won't have any negative consequences, Ullrmak grumbled. So where were we? You were saying that it'll take time before the academy is ready, Nick answered helpfully. Oh, right. Yes, it'll take at least a few weeks. We're going to put it up in an unused building while we construct a more permanent facility. Now that we don't need a full standing army, I can throw a lot more money at this project. We don't need a standing army anymore? Nash asked. Sure don't. The Night Kingdom was our only real threat. The Barban tribes to the north are a friendly sort, but even if they weren't, they're not much of a threat to any sort of organized force. Hells. The only reason the Night Kingdom didn't conquer them is because they're damn hard to invade because of the cold. And to our east and west we have Kalkuti and Bolasir, which are both allies. If one of them decides to betray us, the other will help us. If both of them decide to betray us, having a standing army won't help a damned bit. Finally, the lands to the south are too busy with each other to bother us. So it's time for some of our soldiers to become reservists. Peace at last? Nick asked. Ullrmak laughed. I suppose so, yes. Is all of the Night Kingdom becoming part of the unified chiefdoms now? I asked. No. The Empire of Kalkuti is carving out a portion to the north for themselves. King Icinerath has apparently declared that Bolasir is not to grow, so they're not taking any lands. Instead, we'll be compensating them with a portion of the taxes from our new territories for a time. King Icinerath doesn't want Bolasir to grow? Nick asked. Why? The High Dragon didn't explain himself, but it probably has something to do with the Wilder. One has to be careful with expanding one's borders when you rule over the fair folk. Pardon? Icinerath rules the fair folk? I asked. Just the ones in Bolasir, and not really in a traditional sense. It's a pretty unique relationship. It should come as no surprise that the concept of ruling is different to the Wilder than it is to us. How so? Well, as far as I'm aware, Icinerath can't order them into battle, but he can determine their laws. Apparently there's pretty drastic consequences if the Wilder break these laws too, but I don't know too much about that. They turn into undead when they die, Nick offered. Zombies, vampires, ghouls, stuff like that. At least I think. I see, Ulermak said. So Icinerath could create unreasonable laws if he wanted to? I asked. They must trust him quite a lot. But what's to stop some other tyrant from creating unreasonable laws in an effort to extort the fair folk? Well, as I understand it, the fair folk of Bolasir only bow to Icinerath's bloodline. So if Icinerath died and an elf became king, the fair folk wouldn't be subjects of that king. If I remember right, the whole deal was formed by one of Icinerath's ancestors to protect the citizenry from the fair folk. There was a fight first, but the Wilder conceded defeat and accepted the rule of the High Dragon of the time. Sir, a scout next to the chief whispered in his ear, you have other matters to attend to. Right. Well, it's been fun catching up, boys. Oh, right. I need you to give me a list of potential professors, Yulk. Bear in mind that they will be your co-workers, and that they will be molding the minds of tomorrow. I'll need it before you begin your journey home. Yes, High Chief, I said. All right, guess that's that. You're dismissed. Expect a message within a few weeks. Nick, Nash, and I bowed and left the throne room. Once the doors closed behind us, we realized that we were completely unfamiliar with the layout of the castle. So we petitioned a guard for aid, and she gave us directions toward the exit. Once we found the exit and left the castle, Nash took a deep breath and let it out with a big sigh. All right, let's prepare for the journey home, he said.